you're getting absolutely destroyed by Wolverine every single game and you're probably about to uninstall, right? Well, I just spent my entire day figuring out how to make Wolverine players rage quit, and I'm about to save you a lot of pain in SR. What's up, everyone? My name's Fatal, and can we just acknowledge that Wolf is a huge problem right now? Like, I swear this hero is in every single ranked game if he's not banned, and half the time it feels like there's nothing you can do about it. I've been getting so many messages asking, Fatal, how do I deal with Wolverine? They're ruining ranked for me. And as someone who plays a lot of tank myself, I was struggling with this too until I got so tilted yesterday, I decided to spend my entire stream session just figuring out how to counter them. And dude, once you understand what Wolverine players actually want to do, they become way less scary. Okay, so first things first, most people are trying to counter him completely wrong. Everyone thinks, oh, I'll just pick one of his counters and I'll be fine. But that's not how it works. I learned this the hard way yesterday. I picked what's supposed to be the perfect counter to Wolverine and I still got absolutely demolished. So I'm sitting there like, what am I doing wrong? Then it hit me. I was playing the matchup the exact way he wanted me to. Wolf's whole thing is that he wants to be patient and calculated, almost like you forget he's even there. But if you let him do that, it doesn't matter what hero you're playing, you're going to lose. So the real counter isn't about hero picks, it's about never letting him get into his comfort zone in the first place. Which sounds obvious, but most people have no idea what his comfort zone actually looks like. Wolverine's biggest strength is a patient, tank busting playstyle, right? Most players see this and think, okay, I need to focus him and push him out of my space, or just stay out of his reach. But that's exactly what he wants you to do. Here's what I figured out. Wolverine is designed to control frontline space with fear. When you give him space for free, you're literally playing his game. But also, if you push up even further to focus him, you're putting yourself at risk to getting kidnapped and dragged further away from your team. So instead, you want to pressure him before he can get set up for a kidnap, or try to take space in areas where you're out of his reach. I had this one match on a Rocco where my team kept letting this Wolverine player set up in his favorite spot on the first point. He was just farming my team over and over with kidnaps and kept throwing us off the edge. So instead, we just decided to scale on the higher parts of the map away from the edge, and suddenly he couldn't do anything. Once you're aware of where they are playing, as long as you don't give up space while simultaneously not walking directly into his range, you end up making his job extremely hard. It's like bullying the bully, you know? Wolverine players are used to teams being scared of them, but when you start being aggressive and scaling different areas of the map, you force them to react instead of act, and the majority of them just crumble. For example, I had a game where this Wolf player was absolutely destroying us in the first half, but in the next half, once I started pressuring him early, he started making so many mistakes. By the end of the match, he was basically feeding. Now let's talk about hero picks, because there are some heroes that just make Wolverine's life miserable. He really struggles against consistent or high burst damage and heroes that block mobility. That's why heroes like Punisher, The Thing, and Invisible Woman work so well, because they force Wolverines to play in ways they don't want to. Like Punisher can do consistent damage with his rifle and high burst damage with his shotgun. And since Punisher is a midline hero, you can easily target a Wolverine when he's targeting your first line. And this usually either causes him to burn his passive or die. I was playing Punisher yesterday and this Wolf player was getting so frustrated. They kept trying to do their usual plays, but since he never had his passive, he kept getting shut down. But here's the thing, you don't always need to counterpick. Some of my best games against Wolverine have been on heroes that technically get countered by him. It's all about understanding the matchup better than they do. Actually, I had this one game where I was playing Groot, and everyone on my team was like, Fatal, why don't you swap? But they had nothing on the enemy team to shoot my Groot walls. So I knew exactly how to play that matchup. My walls were creating a lot of pressure on their tanks and their front line was constantly getting killed. So I ended up shutting them down harder than if I had picked an optimal counter like Magneto. The biggest game changer though is team coordination. Wolverine absolutely demolishes uncoordinated teams, but they struggle hard when teams actually work together. Here's a super simple play that works at literally any rank. When Wolverine uses Feral Leap on a teammate, that's your window. You have a few seconds where they can't do damage, and calling out that you've been grabbed and asking for things like Mag Bubble or Invisible Woman's pull will essentially render his kidnap completely useless. But this only works if your team actually knows to look for it. I started calling things like this out in my games, and my win rate against Wolf players went from like 30% to almost 60%. It's literally that simple, Just communicate. The other thing that works really well is mirror picking. Most teams try to fight Wolverine in ways they think work best, but sometimes the most annoying thing to a Wolverine main is another Wolverine who constantly peels for his tanks. They just can't deal with it. I remember this one game where the enemy was popping off in the first half, but then we started doing this coordinated thing where if one of our tanks would get kidnapped, I would be there and ready to counter kidnap the enemy Wolverine. So my tank would be safe and the enemy Wolf would be getting dragged back to my team, where we would all focus him and either burn his passive before he got out, or if he didn't have his passive, he would just die. They ended up getting so tilted, they switched heroes. It was honestly hilarious to watch. All right, now for some advanced tips that you might not be able to find in most guides. The first thing is timing. Wolverine has natural power spikes when he's at full rage and his passive is on cooldown. Most players don't think about this, so they end up fighting wolves when they're at their strongest. Instead, look for fights right after his passive gets burned or when you know his rage has dropped. That's when they're vulnerable and when you can actually punish them. I've won so many fights just by understanding when to engage and when to back off. The second thing is resource management. Wolverine relies heavily on his Feral Leap. If you can bait out his Feral Leap, he becomes way less threatening for at least 15 seconds. The trick is to making them think you're committed when you're really not. In reality, you're paying attention to him the whole time and ready to bubble, invisible woman pull, or just get out of the way and force him to miss. And when you do this, you slow down his pacing for the game a lot. And the third thing that might sound a little weird, the mental game. Wolverine players get super confident when they're ahead, but they tilt really hard when their usual stuff doesn't work. I've seen so many wolves just completely fall apart once you start successfully countering their plays. They start to force bad engagements, make terrible decisions, and overextend all the time. It's like they don't know how to play when they're not dominating. Before we finish up, let me talk about the biggest mistakes I see when people try to counter Wolf. The first mistake is overcorrecting. Just because he's strong doesn't mean you need to completely change your entire playstyle or your entire team comp. I see people do this all the time where they end up playing worse overall because they're trying to force something that they're not comfortable on, or just everyone trying to play around one hero. Small adjustments are usually way more effective than big changes. Like, instead of switching to a completely different hero, maybe just changing your positioning slightly could help. Or instead of avoiding them entirely, maybe just contesting them earlier before their cooldowns reset. The second mistake is tunnel vision. People get so focused on certain heroes that they forget about the rest of their team. Sometimes the real play is to shut down the supports instead of trying to 1v1 the Wolverine directly. If you do this, he can't be healed and he'll die a lot more frequently. And the biggest mistake I see is giving up mentally. I've been in games where on the first point, if they have a wolf, we have a wolf, and their wolf is popping off earlier, they type GG we lose immediately. That type of mental attitude and just the ability to just give up that fast is going to be what loses you games, not the hero pick. Look, at the end of the day, there's no such thing as an uncounterable hero. Wolverine might feel broken sometimes, but they have weaknesses just like everyone else. You just need to know what to look for. Correct positioning, smart engagements, and team coordination. Master those things and Wolverine will never be a problem for you again. It just takes practice and patience. If this video helped you finally understand how to deal with Wolverines, smash that like button and let me know in the comments, what hero gives you the most trouble in ranked right now? And if you want to see me demonstrate these strategies live, follow me over on Twitch and turn those notifications on, and join the Discord if you have any further questions. Keep climbing, and I'll see you next time.